What's up, Rovers? For those of you that clicked on this video, know that it is a follow-up guide to the complete Iuno guide I uploaded a few weeks ago. This is a full team building guide for her with all team variants, gearing, and rotations. It also includes Galbrena. Due to its depth and length, I've chosen to split it off into its own video. When discussing team tiering, it is assumed Iuno signature is equipped. This does not affect comparisons within Aero teams, but can impact how effective she is in multi-element teams due to element-specific buffs. This video assumes you have a basic understanding of Iuno's kit. If you're interested in a full breakdown on everything Iuno, please check out my previous video at the top right. It is also assumed all Shorekeepers and Verinas shown today will be using variation, and if you don't have this, expect to perform several extra basic attacks to fill their concerto. Now, Iuno can be both a SubDPS and MainDPS. She already has the highest SubDPS damage in the game, and can extend her rotation whenever you want efficiently, maintaining the same DPS despite her longer field time. This makes Iuno extremely flexible in team building and fitting even into teams she has no business being in. In other words, she has effectively surpassed Changli as the premier SubDPS unit. Her closing refrain, flux, and even arc edge casts can be quick swapped in multi-element teams, allowing Iuno to maintain her energy economy and concerto generation to minimize her dedicated field time. As a sub-DPS, she prefers to be paired with heavy units for her to buff, or Ciaccona for Aero buffs. As a main DPS, she prefers to be paired with Ciaccona specifically because we lack ideal buffers. Alternative liberation buffers include Yinlin, Changli, Jiyan at S2+, and also Aero Rover if your Blood Pack's pledge has high enough refine on the Aero Amplify team bonus. Now, while I only list the best teams today, you can honestly play her on nearly any team as a sub-DPS. Iuno strongly prefers Intro because it grants her 40% of her Forte bar, which is used to buff her damage and produce extra concerto for faster sub-DPS rotations. The main difference is where she fits her liberation. In sub-DPS, we ult early in the rotation, wasting overcap and maxing out the Forte bar. This is fine because our goal is to dump a full Forte bar as fast as possible for bonus concerto so she can outro. In main DPS, we delay her ult to avoid overcap, since her Forte is also our main source of damage buffs. This allows us to dump 2/3 of her Forte bar twice to buff more moves. Additionally, Iuno's Forte will still buff your entire move even if there's not enough Forte remaining to cast, so long as it isn't 0. Therefore, we can actually cast 3/4 of a Forte's bar worth of moves twice when playing Iuno main DPS. S6 instead refills your entire Forte bar and resets all arc edge cooldowns, which means you essentially just need to run the sub-DPS rotation twice. All shown Iuno cancels today are DPS neutral or positive. She doesn't really ever lose DPS due to her evenly distributed output. She can swap cancel, instant alt cancel, or end lag alt cancel closing refrain to speed up her rotation. Flux can also be swap cancelled or dodge cancelled depending on whether you need the energy produced by it. Moonbow Basic 3 can be skill cancelled by Arc Edge after the second shot, after the first shot, or even as soon as Basic 3 starts when Iuno aims the bow, depending on how fast you want to go and how much damage and energy you're willing to give up. Arc Edge can be cancelled by Liberation, Outro, or Absolute Fullness, but if the initial shot fires, the cluster missiles will still hit regardless. For character builds, it is assumed Iuno is on 3-piece Crown of Valor plus a 2-piece set of your choice. 2-piece Aero or Attack is fine, but 2-piece ER is also good because higher ER Iuno is what allows her to use more and more cancels in her sub-DPS rotation. I will always recommend 4-3-3-1-1 for Iuno as 5-piece Moonlit or 4-4-1-1-1 setups barely have any advantage for her and lose significantly if you want to play her as a main DPS. She doesn't give herself any damage percent, so double Aero main stats on your 3 costs is strongly preferred, especially if you're using 2-piece ER or Attack instead of 2-piece Aero. Aero Attack on your 3 costs is a 2 to 8% DPS loss depending on weapon, and double Attack or 4-4-1-1-1 is a 10 to 20% DPS loss depending on weapon. For sub-DPS, 125 ER is recommended as a minimum for smooth rotations, with 135 plus being the starting point for extra cancels to go even faster. Main DPS can run with just 100 to 110 ER as Iuno will produce far more energy than a typical main carry. Now, Iuno slightly prefers Shorekeeper over Verina due to her own liberation having a 25 seconds cooldown, and common teammates already having medium fast rotations. Verina can still grant Iuno sub-DPS double intro though, which allows her to outro quickly even if you lack attack the proper ER. Main DPS Iuno doesn't really benefit unless your sub-DPS cares, like Changli. It is assumed both Shorekeeper and Verina are on 5-piece healer set with 250 ER in combat. Now let's start off with Iuno's most straightforward teams. This includes her obvious Augusta Iuno team pairing, and her Aero team variant since she benefits significantly from Ciaccona and at least one Jiyan Aero DPS also happens to be heavy damage. These are primarily sub-DPS Iuno teams. Main DPS Iuno and other multi-element teams will be covered later in the video. Now the most important resonator for Iuno is Augusta. They are a perfect pairing for each other as Augusta is the only other resonator that can be buffed by Iuno's plus 40% damage amplify buff from One Light Blessings. Iuno also grants plus 50% heavy amplify on outro, and Augusta's 75% heavy damage typing overall. In other words, Iuno is one of Augusta's best buffers while dealing a massive amount of damage herself. If you need to save your Shorekeeper or Verina for another team, the only triple DPS Augusta Iuno team that works well is Phrolova. She has the fastest rotation time as a main carry, and remember that Augusta does not permit the unit she outros to quick swap. So Ciaccona is another option too if you want a faster sub-DPS in the third slot instead at slight damage loss. Shorekeeper and Verina are still the better options for Augusta Iuno team. For Jiyan teams, Iuno is an excellent sub-DPS for them, even if One Light Blessings don't apply to Jiyan. This is due to Iuno's high raw damage and 50% heavy amplify outro applying to him. Iuno is a solid upgrade over Mortifi because she also no longer needs to worry about being hit like Mortifi and is 5 seconds forte self buff. Her being Aero means a mono Aero Ciaccona team also works extremely well for Jiyan since she can give global Aero team buffs and Aero res shred on the enemy. One exception though, if you play a hyper quick swap team with Jiyan and Ciaccona, you could fit 2 of their rotations each inside of one Shorekeeper ult, aka a 40 seconds team rotation with double DPS ult. Doing so will make the team stronger than any Iuno variants, but it's very hard to play. Finally, for free to play options, Iuno Jiyan team can be played with Aero Rover 2 since we now have access to R5 Blood Pack's Pledge for plus 26% team Aero Amplify. Now Augusta should be on 3-piece Crown of Valor as it's her strongest set. The 2-piece can be Void Thunder for 10% Electro, Lingering Tunes for 10% attack, or even Moonlit for 10% ER. She'll want at least 120 ER, with 130 being the ceiling for comfort. Phrolova should be on 3-piece Dream of the Lost for big crit buffs and echo damage bonus for a Kati. The 2-piece can be any of the plus 10% Havoc sets preferably, as she gives herself a massive amount of attack buffs during her Liberation, which dilutes Lingering Tunes. Remember that ER is irrelevant on Phrolova. Ciaccona works both for sub-DPS or main DPS Iuno because of her sky-high damage at just 4 to 5 seconds of field time, and bringing Aero buffs plus Shred. She should be on 5-piece Gus the Welkin to also buff Iuno and will want roughly 120 ER. I recommend using Fleur de Lis Echo for crowd control, and Jiyan will usually be on the Sierra Gale set, but if Ciaccona is on the same team, he can use the Windward Pilgrimage with Fleur de Lis for higher damage and crowd control since it also gives crit. He should be on minimum 125 ER for consistent rotations. I would not advise going to 120 on him for a Iuno team setup. Nightmare Baringle is also preferred over normal Baringle for Jiyan, since Iuno does not want to swap off during her rotation. Aero Rover can use Healer set because all of her teams today are attack scaling. Other Aero DPS sets can work but result in much lower team DPS. They should be on 150 plus ER, but this is already reached by using Blood Pack's Pledge. Remember to refine it to R5, and dupes can be gotten from Exploration and Septimon and Sanguis Plateau. Let's start off with the premium team's rotation first. Keep in mind this rotation is for S0 Augusta. Otherwise, move the Liberation 1 I use at the start to inside of her rotation, before Liberation 2, to make sure it receives your Crown of Will's buffs. Now after casting your normal ult, swap to Iuno to cast Skill for Energy and Concerto, then swap to Shorekeeper for basic 1-2-3 plus Liberation Cancel. Do another 1-2-3 plus Heavy at full Forte into a Skill Cancel, then do one more 1-2-3 plus Heavy to finish your Concerto. Echo before outro onto Iuno. If you're using Verina, you would swap it to basic 3-4-5 plus Liberation, and skill plus Echo into Aerial × 2 to outro. If you're using Ciaccona, you would spam 3 times jump cancels plus aerial 1-2 and a basic 4 chains in a row to fill your entire forte bar. Then cast Heron if you're using it, dodging into skill cancel into a pre-hold heavy to fire your forte grouping skill. Liberation cancel on shot and then outro. Once on Iuno, cast closing refrain and wait until you hit the ground. If you're using Heron, cast it on slam and dodge cancel, then cast Liberation. You can cast Lady of Sea before or after ult, then jump flux into a dodge dodge cancel. Use Enhanced Moonbow basic 1, 2, 3 into an arc edge cancel once the second leg shot comes out from Moonbow 3. Cast the second arc edge and use absolute fullness only after the shot is fired. Outro cancel into Augusta. Pre-hold heavy during your intro animation to immediately cast a spin slash. Skill afterwards without cutting off spin slash early. Wait out the animation and then hold heavy to cast spin slash again. If you're on S1 plus on Augusta, normally you would cast Liberation 1 right here after normal skill to avoid an input bug issue. Then pre-hold heavy during Liberation 1 to cast a second spin slash. Your Ascendancy wheel should now be full. Cast 3 times Forte skills and pre-hold Liberation halfway through the plunge to make sure the AoE comes out and then enter Liberation 2. Do Sunborn times 9 and your Everbright nuke. Now if you're an S0, your normal ult will be back by now. Cast it and outro into your healer, or Ciaccona to reset the team. Shorekeeper does basic 1, 2, 3 into a Liberation, then heavy plus skill and echo to outro into Iuno. Verina would intro into Liberation, then skill plus echo and aerial times 2 to outro. Ciaccona would intro into basic 3-4 with a jump cancel for another basic 4, then skill cancel into a pre-hold heavy for Forte shot and Liberation cancel when it comes out. Remember that you cannot swap off your healer or Ciaccona here because it will break Augusta's outro +1 majesty. Now, Phrolova and the Slot 3 Premium team is a replacement for if you cannot use Shorekeeper or Healer and or don't want to use Ciaccona. This team is straightforward to rotate but has a high skill ceiling due to extensive use of animation cancels to keep rotation time down. We lead with Augusta's Lib 1 and swap immediately to Iuno's skill to unlock Closing Refrain. Swap to Phrolova into a basic 2-3, then Forte skill or dodge into Forte basic. Normal skill cancel and Forte basic, then echo cancel the Forte basic, and then immediately swap to Augusta to precast skill Warrior's Blade to charge her Forte early. Swap to Iuno and cast Closing Refrain for Concerto and Energy. Swap back to Augusta and heavy into Spin Slash. Then the instant she lunges, swap back to Phrolova for another basic 2-3, dodging on hit into another Forte basic. This should get you your 6th note, dodging again into a pre-hold heavy for Scarlet Coda. Liberation and immediately outro onto Iuno. Liberation on her immediately after, and jump plus dodge cancel Flux. You can cast Lady of Sea before or after her ult. Do an Enhanced Moonbow basic 1, 2, 3 and Arc Edge skill cancer after the first shot of basic 3. Cast a second Arc Edge skill and use absolute fullness only after the shot is fired. Outro cancel into Augusta. Heavy to immediately cast Spin Slash. Your Ascendancy wheel should now be full. Cast Echo to trigger one more Ekati enhanced attack, then cast Forte skill times 3 and pre-hold Liberation halfway through the plunge to make sure the AoE comes out and enter Liberation 2. Do Sunborn times 9 and Everbright nuke. Reset the team into Phrolova, performing your entire on-field rotation without swapping off to activate Augusta's outro +1 majesty effect. Intro plus basic 3 and then dodge cancel into a Forte basic. Skill cancel Phrolova into another Forte basic and echo cancel that. Then BA 1, 2, 3 again, dodging on the last hit into one more Forte basic for your 6th note. Dodge again and pre-hold heavy to cast Scarlet Coda once more. Liberation and then intro into Iuno to cast Closing Refrain. Immediately swap to Augusta and cast skill Warrior's Blade to fill her Forte. Cast Heavy Spin Slash and swap off Iuno the moment she lunges forward. After her backstep. Jump to Flux and Liberation cancel. Echo can go before or after ult. Enhance Moonbow basic 1, 2, 3 plus Arc Edge skill cancel as the first shot of basic 3 comes out. Cast Arc Edge a second time and absolute fullness only after the shot is fired. Augusta comes in and continues like normal. We once again pre-hold heavy for another Spin Slash and then cast Echo for another Hekati enhanced attack. Cast Liberation 1 for big damage, then spam Forte skill times 3. Pre-hold heavy Liberation halfway through plunge to ensure the AoE nuke goes through, then do Fancy ult and reset team into Phrolova again. Now for Jiyan Iuno teams, the third slot can be a healer or Ciaccona. Both are fairly easy to play, with the only difference being Ciaccona not needing to outro in the first rotation so it can take advantage of an early Jiyan DPS phase. If on Verina, lead with Liberation to get her attack buff up for the team. All other variants will then use Jiyan's skill and Iuno's skill for Concerto and Energy, then swap to your healer or Ciaccona and perform their rotation. Shorekeeper does basic 1, 2, 3 plus Liberation, then another basic 1, 2, 3 heavy on full Forte and a skill cancel. Do another basic 1, 2, 3 plus heavy and then echo into outro. Verina on the other hand would do a standard basic 3, 4, 5 swap in, then skill and echo and aerial times 2 into outro. Ciaccona simply casts skill and echo into Liberation and swaps off. All teams bring in Iuno next, casting Closing Refrain. If using Heron, use it when you hit the ground, then dodge cancel into Liberation. Lady of the Sea can be casted before or after ult. Jump and dodge cancel your Flux, then perform Enhanced Moonbow Basic 1, 2, 3. Cast Arc Edge after the second shot of BA3, then cast another Arc Edge. Cast Absolute Fullness after, and it's optional, but only do it or outro when Arc Edge has already fired its shot. Now Jiyan intros and we immediately cast Liberation. Basic once with a skill cancel right as his foot lands on the ground. Then either spam basics until skill is available again, or alternate more dodge cancels when his foot lands on the ground for the double dragon attack. Continue using Qinglong basics after second skill cast until this mode ends, then outro into Shorekeeper or Ciaccona. If you're using Verina, outro into Iuno instead to cast Closing Refrain for better energy, then swap into Verina. Now, we will complete Shorekeeper's Verina or Ciaccona's remaining rotations, then cycle the team into Iuno like before. Shorekeeper does basic 1, 2, 3 into Liberation, then another basic 1, 2, 3 with a heavy and skill echo cancel. Ciaccona does intro plus BA3 4. I recommend casting Fleur de Lis Echo if you have it during this. Jump into aerial 1, 2, landing into another basic 4. Skill cancel into a pre-ult heavy to cast Forte. To group enemies, then Liberation cancel and outro to Iuno. Aero Rover though, in third slot is comparable to running a healer but weaker than using Ciaccona. This team is a bit slower due to Aero Rover's longer rotation and subpar quick swap windows matching Iuno or Jiyan. We lead with Aero Rover's skill and swap to Iuno and cast skill to enable Closing Refrain. Swap back to Rover and cast Cloudburst 1, 2 into an aerial plunge. Skill into the air again and immediately swap to Iuno to cast Closing Refrain for energy and Concerto. Swap back to Aero Rover and perform another Cloudburst 1, 2 into aerial plunge. You can cast Fleur de Lis if you're using your Echo here. Skill back into the air one last time. If you're using normal Peringle, swap to Jiyan and cast it here. Perform Cloudburst 1 only on Aero Rover to fill the last bit of your Forte and Liberation cancel to reset onto the ground. Cast Forte and your Echo if you haven't yet and outro into Iuno. If using Heron, cast it here, then immediately dodge into Liberation cancel. Lady of the Sea can be casted before or after ult. Jump and dodge cancel your Flux, then perform Enhanced Moonbow Basic 1, 2, 3. Cast Arc Edge after the second shot of BA3, then cast another Arc Edge. Casting Absolute Fullness after is optional, but only do it or outro when Arc Edge has already fired its shot. Jiyan intros and immediately cast Liberation. Basic once, with the skill cancel right as his foot lands on the ground. Then either spam basics until skill is available again, or alternate more dodge cancels when his foot lands on the ground for the double dragon attack. Continue using Qinglong basics after second skill cast until this mode ends, then outro into Aero Rover again. It puts us in the air, so immediately Cloudburst 1, 2 and aerial plunge to the ground. Skill back up in the air and swap to Jiyan to cast normal skill. Immediately swap to Iuno normal skill to prepare Closing Refrain, then swap back to Aero Rover to cast Cloudburst 1, 2 and Fleur de Lis Echo if you're using it. Liberation to reset to ground and cast Forte. Immediately swap to Iuno to cast Closing Refrain, then Jiyan to cast normal Peringle if you're using it, and then swap back to Aero Rover, whose Concerto should now be full. Cast Bell or Kelpie if using it, then outro into Iuno to continue the team. Now, while Iuno is an excellent sub-DPS for Augusta and Jiyan, she's also an amazing main DPS. This is due to her stellar sub-DPS output that can be extended into a main DPS rotation, with equally efficient field time. In other words, her damage per second does not really fall when extending her rotation, being under 5% less efficient. Augusta, on the other hand, loses roughly 15% damage per second when extending her rotation. This is why Iuno feels equally good in both roles. Of course, this also depends on efficient use of her Forte bar resource, because it buffs all your damage even if you cast a move that costs more than your remaining sentience. This is also why main DPS Iuno delays her Liberation as a Forte restoring tool to further push damage. Her best teammates in this role is currently by far Ciaccona. Her super fast rotations under 5 seconds with high damage and buffs allows Iuno to comfortably field a 12 to 14 second main DPS rotation with high adaptability and still fit in a healer or Liberation Aero Amplify buffer. No 5-star Aero Amplify buffer currently exists, so the third slot is currently competing with less than optimal choices, such as Changli, Yinlin, or an S2 Jiyan. Aero Rover also works in a pinch and is strictly superior to using Alto. If you you really have no other options and don't even have Aero Rover unlocked, then Havoc Rover is the last crutch, but Iuno is really waiting for her own mono Aero comp that doesn't need to crush on Aero Rover as much. Generally, the best performing, easy to play Iuno hyper teams will be healer, Ciaccona Iuno, but you can get slightly better performance in a quick swap comp with the Aero Rover instead of healer. Replacing Ciaccona with anyone else always results in a massive DPS drop for Iuno teams, both due to worse buffs and slower team rotations. Now, Ciaccona works both for SubDPS and MainDPS Iuno because of her sky-high output at just 4 to 5 seconds of field time and bringing Aero buffs plus Shred. She should be in 5-piece Gus the Welkin to also buff Iuno and will want roughly 120 ER. I recommend using Fleur de Echo for crowd control. Aero Rover can use healer set because all of her teams today are attack scaling. Other Aero DPS sets can work but result in lower team DPS. They should be on 150 plus ER, but this is already reached by using Bloodpack's Pledge. Remember to refine it to R5. Dupes can be gotten from Exploration in Septimon and Sanguis Plateau. If coping with Havoc Rover, this will be a sub-DPS H Rover, which means 130 ER needed and on old Havoc set with full double crit and Dreamless. Changli will want higher ER than normal in this dual DPS team at 125 to 130. She'll be using 5-piece Molten Rift with Nightmare Rider as her main echo. Yinlin can use Empyrean or Moonlit today. Pick the one you have built better. Empyrean is also easier to use. She will want 130 plus ER for today's team comp since we will be using a Concerto tech that sacrifices some of her energy for faster rotation, as 2 Jiyan Shin should have decently high ER and on 5-piece Moonlit. Mercado is recommended for Concerto speed, so I won't be able to show her rotation today because I don't have Jiyan Shin's S2, but without it she is too slow to be viable. Iuno Healer is by far the comfiest Hypercarry variant and second strongest. Lead with Iuno's skill into Ciaccona's skill, then perform your entire healer rotation. Shorekeeper does basic 1-2-3 plus Liberation, then basic 1-2-3 plus Heavy and skill cancel. Then another basic 1-2-3 and Heavy into an echo cancel and outro. Verina would instead swap into basic 3-4-5 plus Liberation, then skill and echo with aerial times 2 to outro. Both teams bring in Ciaccona and play her full standard rotation, being basic 3-4 plus Fleur de if you're using it, and a jump cancel into aerial 1-2 to plunge into another basic 4. If you're using Heron, cast it here and dodge immediately into pre-old Heavy Forte for a quadruple downbeat. Cast Liberation when the shot comes out and outro into Iuno. Cast Closing Refrain and spam jump. Dodge cancel Flux and cast Enhanced Arc Edge to efficiently use her Forte. Perform Enhanced Moonbow basic 1-2-3 casting Liberation once the second leg shot comes out. Lady of the Sea can be casted before or after ult. Use another Enhanced Moonbow basic 1-2-3 and this time cast second Enhanced Arc Edge after the second leg shot comes out. Your Forte will now be empty. Cast one more unenhanced Moonbow basic 1-2-3. Every odd rotation, including this first one, your Arc Edge will come off cooldown a third time. Cast it if it's available and wait until the shot fires, which is what I didn't do here because I forgot, then outro to reset the team. Shorekeeper teams reset into her to perform the entire rotation, whereas Verina teams reset into Ciaccona, just to get extra Forte to shorten her rotation. She will swap back into Verina anyways to finish her rotation, and then both teams go back into Ciaccona. Now, the Aero Rover version of this team is technically higher DPS, but only if your Aero Rover is actually full DPS build, while still being on healer set. If you somehow meet these requirements, then this is how the quick swap team is played. Start with Aero Rover, immediately swap to Iuno to cast a normal skill, then swap to Ciaccona to cast a normal skill also for Concerto. Swap back to Aero Rover for Cloud Burst 1-2 plus Aerial Slam. Swap back to Ciaccona as soon as the slam starts to cast Aerial 2 and Fleur de Lis for crowd control. Then plunge into basic 4. Swap back to Aero Rover to skill back in the air and Cloud Burst 1-2 plus Aerial Plunge again. Swap again to Ciaccona to get another Forte segment mid-air with Aerial 2 into basic 4. Then swap back to Aero Rover one more time and skill into the air with Fleur de Lis if you're using it. Cloud Burst 1 to fill the rest of Forte and Liberation cancel. Cast Forte and Bell or Kelpie if you're using them, then outro into Ciaccona. Her Forte should already be full, so hold Heavy during intro and immediately Liberation once quadruple downbeat comes out. Outro into Iuno and cast Closing Refrain. Jump and dodge cancel into an Enhanced Arc Edge to efficiently use her Forte. Perform Enhanced Moonbow basic 1-2-3, casting Liberation once the second leg shot comes out. Lady of the Sea can be casted before or after ult. Use another Enhanced Moonbow basic 1-2-3, and this time cast second Enhanced Arc Edge after the second leg shot comes out. Your Forte will now be empty. Cast one more unenhanced Moonbow basic 1-2-3. Every odd rotation, including this first one, your Arc Edge will come off cooldown a third time. Cast it if it's available, wait until the shot fires, which is what I didn't do here. Then outro to reset the team. Aero Rover intros into the air, Cloudburst 1-2 and Aerial to plunge. Swap in air to Ciaccona for Aerial 2 and Fleur de Lis into basic 4 for a Forte segment. Skill cancel and swap back to Aero Rover. Skill back into the air into Cloudburst 1-2 with another Aerial plunge. Swap in air to Ciaccona again to Aerial 2 into another basic 4 for your second Forte segment. Swap back to Rover and cast Liberation and Forte, then echo to outro into Ciaccona, whose Forte should be full. Now if you don't have Ciaccona, the best free-to-play Copium team would be Aero Rover Shorekeeper, because of R5 Blood Pack's pledge granting 26% Aero team amplify. To do this, lead with Iuno skill for free and Aero Rover skill into the air. Immediately swap to Shorekeeper for basic 1-2-3, then swap back to Rover in air for Cloudburst 1-2 and Aerial plunge. Swap back early to Shorekeeper. She might be in the air, she might be on the ground locked into her BA4 or resetting to BA1. Regardless, finish the last Forte segment and heavy to dump it. If you're in air, holding heavy will both get that 5th stack and dump all. Immediately Liberation cancel in all cases. Then basic 1-2-3, twice if needed. To fill Forte again, then heavy and skill cancel into echo to outro into Aero Rover. Cloudburst 1-2 in air and immediately Liberation, then Forte and enhanced basic for stage 2 hit. Then echo into outro. Iuno cast closing refrain. Jump and dodge cancel and then enhance arc edge to efficiently use her Forte. Perform enhance moonbow basic 1-2-3, casting Liberation once the second leg shot comes out. Lady of the Sea can be casted before or after ult. Use another enhanced moonbow 1-2-3, and this time cast second enhance arc edge after the second leg shot comes out. Your Forte will now be empty. Cast one more unenhanced moonbow BA 1-2-3. Every odd rotation, including this first one, your arc edge will come off cooldown a 3rd time. Cast it if it's available, wait until the shot fires, and then outro to reset the team into Shorekeeper. Basic 1-2-3, then swap to Aero Rover for skill and Cloudburst 1-2. Aerial plunge and swap in air to Shorekeeper while holding heavy to plunge for 5th segment and instantly dump them, with Liberation cancel. BA 1-2-3 again with skill and echo to outro to Aero Rover to continue the team. If you're going to use budget premium buffers like Yinlin or Changli, which are notably worse than Ciaccona for Iuno, I would recommend only trying this with Shorekeeper, otherwise damage will be scuffed. We lead with Iuno skill into Yinlin skill plus Liberation cancel. This grants us an extra magnetic blast hit triggered by ult during time stop, which grants an extra 5 concerto per enemy the blast procs on. Because skill marks enemy and ult has a bigger AoE, the more enemies there are, the more enemies our ult can hit, and the more concerto we can immediately generate. Cast heavy after, and skill cancel into a Shorekeeper swap basic 1-2-3. Swap back to Yinlin for basic 2-3 and then swap back to Shorekeeper for another basic 1-2-3 plus heavy into a Liberation cancel. Basic 1-2-3 one more time with another heavy and skill plus echo to outro. Yinlin should come in with full Forte. Heavy to immediately fill the last bit of concerto and outro into Iuno. Cast closing refrain, then jump and dodge cancel into an enhanced arc edge to efficiently use her Forte. Perform enhanced moonbow basic 1-2-3, casting Liberation once the second leg shot comes out. Lady of the Sea can be casted before or after ult. Use another enhanced moonbow BA 1-2-3 and this time cast second enhanced arc edge after the second leg shot comes out. Your Forte will now be empty. Cast one more unenhanced moonbow basic 1-2-3. Every odd rotation, including this first one, your arc edge will come off cooldown a 3rd time. Cast it if it's available and wait until the shot fires, which is what I didn't do here because I forgot. Then outro to reset the team into Shorekeeper. Do basic 1-2-3, then swap into Yinlin again for skill plus Liberation cancel. Perform another heavy into skill cancel, then swap back to Shorekeeper for another basic 1-2-3 plus heavy. Swap back to Yinlin for a quick basic 2-3, then swap back into a Shorekeeper Liberation. Skill and echo to outro into Yinlin. Her Forte should be full, so Forte and outro to Iuno and continue. The Changli variant is far harder to play than the Yinlin team, and is arguably not any stronger. While Changli deals notably higher raw damage than Yinlin, her 20% Liberation Amplify also only lasts 10 seconds instead of 14. This results in Iuno's damage loss. Luckily, the final 4 seconds is generally when Iuno's Forte is already depleted, and is the weakest part of her rotation. Lead with Iuno's skill into Changli's skill, swap to Shorekeeper BA 1-2-3 quickly, and squeeze in Iuno's closing refrain as fast as you can before casting Changli Liberation, before she has a chance to stab, which would waste her True Sight stack. Pre-hold heavy, so she will again cast Flaming Sacrifice without using her stack, then swap to Shorekeeper BA1 plus heavy to dump Forte with a Liberation cancel. Do another BA1-2 before swapping to Changli to stab and skill. Swap back to Shorekeeper for another BA1-2-3 and swap again into another Changli stab. Echo, then swap back to Shorekeeper heavy plus skill and Echo to outro into Changli. Intro and Phoenix for a third Forte, then slam into BA3-4 with stab for her fourth Forte, holding heavy into Flaming Sacrifice and outro cancel into Iuno. You need to make it here within about 14 seconds of the fight starting because she already casted Closing Refrain at the start. Remember that Liberation cannot refresh lunar cycle duration. Immediately jump and dodge into an Enhanced Arc Edge cancel, then cast Liberation once the shot comes out. Lady of the Sea can be casted before or after ult. Use another Enhanced Moonbow 1-2-3 and this time cast second Enhanced Arc Edge after the second leg shot comes out. Your Forte will now be empty. Cast one more unenhanced Moonbow 1-2-3 with optional Forte heavy, then outro to reset the team into Shorekeeper. Do BA 1-2-3 and swap to Iuno for a quick basic bow 1 before Changli's skill into Liberation at top of the cast. Pre-hold heavy for Flaming Sacrifice, then back to Shorekeeper BA 1-2-3 plus heavy, and swap again into another Changli stab. Echo, then swap back into a Shorekeeper Liberation. Skill and echoing to outro onto Changli. Intro and Phoenix for second stack like before, then slam down to a BA 3-4 plus stab for third stack. Skill again and stab for fourth stack. Flaming Sacrifice to outro onto Iuno like first rotation, and this time though, we don't have Closing Refrain precasted, so we need to wait out its animation. Then jump dodge flux into an Enhanced Arc Edge. Again, do an Enhanced Moonbow BA 1-2-3 with a Liberation cancel once the second leg shot comes out. Do another Enhanced Moonbow BA 1-2-3 and a second Enhanced Arc Edge, waiting out the shot before outroing back to Shorekeeper to continue. Now, Havoc Rover works near identical to Havoc Rover Carlotta, with Rover casting an extra out of rotation skill during Iuno's Closing Refrain animation. We lead with Shorekeeper BA 1-2-3 and swap to Rover Liberation. Skill and Dreamless into a Iuno skill cast before swapping back to Shorekeeper to finish her rotation. Another BA 1-2-3 plus heavy with Liberation cancel, then BA 1-2-3 with heavy again, and then a skill cancel and echo to outro into Iuno. Cast Closing Refrain and mash space to flux. Dodge cancel into an Enhanced Arc Edge skill, followed by Enhanced Moonbow BA 1-2-3. Liberation cancel once the second leg shot comes out. Lady of the Sea can be casted before or after ult. Use another Enhanced Moonbow BA 1-2-3 and this time cast second Enhanced Arc Edge after the second leg shot comes out. Outro onto Rover and slam down. Cast normal skill to fill rest of Forte and hold heavy to enter Dark Surge state. Immediately cast Life Taker, then do one BA 1-2-3-4-5 chain before casting Liberation and Dreamless to outro and reset the team into Shorekeeper. Perform her entire rotation without swapping off, so BA 1-2-3 plus skill cancel, then BA 1-2-3 plus heavy and Liberation cancel, then skill and echo to outro into Iuno. Cast Closing Refrain and swap to Havoc Rover immediately to cast normal skill. Swap back to Iuno and jump plus dodge flunks into an Enhanced Arc Edge skill cast. Use Enhanced Moonbow basic 1-2-3. Liberation cancel once the second leg shot comes out. Lady of the Sea can be casted before or after her ult. Use another Enhanced Moonbow BA 1-2-3 and this time cast second Enhanced Arc Edge. After the second leg shot comes out, outro onto Rover and slam down to cast skill, filling rest of Forte to continue. Now, the remaining section of this video will cover Iuno and the sub-DPS role for non-Aero teams. These teams are notable for being fantastic alternatives when you lack the best in slot buffer for your carry. While this list can technically go on forever due to Iuno being compatible with basically anyone, similar to Changli, we will instead focus on teams where she has a clear synergy beyond just good quick swaps and damage. Two main options stand out for multi-element teams for Iuno sub-DPS. The first is our newly released unit, Galbrena. She has decently fast rotations that are pretty quick swap compatible to reduce the amount of setup time before activating her Forte bar to DPS. Despite heavy damage being her high standard type, it's still only 30 to 40% as most of her big moves are actually considered echo skill damage, ranging 50 to 60%. This reduces the value of Iuno's outro buff by about half, but Galbrena Iuno team setups still range around the ballpark of Carlotta Premium DPS. Iuno loses damage from dropping one light buffs when swapping off, so it is preferred to set up up Galbrena's extra basics during a healer quick swap instead of during Iuno's rotation. Lupa can be used as a replacement for healer if desired, but is not any better than using Shorekeeper because Lupa's outro is wasted in this team. Now if you do have Lupa, it's preferred to just not use Iuno since you will get similar performance but with better quick swap windows. In Phoebe teams, Iuno also functions as an excellent upgrade over Mortifi. Phoebe is fast and does not benefit much from quick swap as a main DPS. Unlike Zani, she also self-applies a plus 256% amplify on Star Flash, her main source of damage, which significantly reduces the value of Mortifi's outro. Iuno's high raw damage becomes much more apparent when devaluing the outros of both her and Mortifi. When played with Ciaccona, this allows Chia to buff both Iuno and Phoebe by providing Aero damage buffs and Aero res shred with signature while also applying Frazzle constantly off field so Phoebe can continue to DPS even through wave spawns. It is not recommended to replace Ciaccona with Spectral Rover in this team since Iuno's outro buff is lost when Phoebe quick swaps, but Rover would need to reapply Frazzle on new enemies for Phoebe to DPS effectively. In Zani teams, Iuno is barely an improvement over Mortifi. Zani does not self-buff as much, so outros matter here, and Mortifi is also faster than Iuno. Zani's own rotation is very slow, much slower than even Phoebe DPS, and her kit's lower raw damage was balanced around having quick swap windows and better team buffs. Using Iuno pressures you to rush her rotation, which loses damage and also prevents you from quick swapping to build extra concerto on Phoebe or your healer for future rotations. If you're using Spectral Rover instead, it's even worse because now you can't quick swap Zani for Rover to apply more Frazzle and generate extra blaze. Now for the Roccia enjoyers out there though, Iuno's probably the best we will ever get. Iuno grants her a 50% heavy amplify, which buffs all her real fantasy bounces. You do double the bounces as a main DPS, so it makes a massive difference. Roccia also has a fast 12 seconds rotation as a main carry, so you can comfortably fit Iuno's entire 7 to 8 seconds rotation with barely any cancels needed. Now Galbrena should be using the new 3-piece Flamewing set as it's her strongest set. The 2-piece can be any plus 10% fusion, as she only needs about 115 to 120 ER depending on quick swaps. Make sure to use Korosaurus because it gives plus 12% fusion and plus 20% echo damage bonus. Lupa, if used, should be on at least 120 ER. Even at 120, you will still have to 2 times normal skill before casting her Liberation on subsequent rotations. If you want to skip this, it requires 130 plus ER. Use 5-piece Flaming Claw print so she can give Galbrena extra fusion damage. Phoebe should be on 5-piece Eternal Radiance when played as a main carry. It's okay to be missing 1 crit rate roll because her set gives 20%. Nightmare Ice is comparable to Capitanius as her top echo. When played as a sub-DPS though, she rotates before Iuno and Zani teams. She can still carry Moonlit set above Iuno if you don't have a good second Eternal Radiance set because Zani will be using one. 110 is recommended on Phoebe as main DPS and 120 as a sub DPS. Zani should also be using the Eternal Radiance set and preferably 125 ER. Capitanius is slightly better than Nightmare Ike's as her for top slot echo. For Roccia main DPS, 110 to 120 ER is comfortable. You could put her on Old Havoc set or Midnight Veil. Now these teams are pretty simple and focus on setting up closing refrain and some of Galbrena's forte bar during the healer rotation. If you're on Shorekeeper, open with BA 123, then both teams swap to Iuno normal skill and immediately swap to Galbrena basic 234 plus skill. Swap back to Iuno to cast closing refrain, then swap to your healer and finish the rotation. For Shorekeeper, this is BA 123 plus heavy plus liberation. Then another BA 123 plus heavy and skill and echo into outro. Verina would instead swap into a BA 345 plus liberation, then skill and echo jumping into an aerial times 2 to outro. Both teams bring in Iuno next and immediately cast Liberation. Lady of Sea could be cast immediately before or after Liberation. Jump and dodge cancel your Flux, then perform Enhanced Moonbow BA 123. Cast Arc Edge after the first shot of BA 3, then cast another Arc Edge. Casting Absolute Fullness after is optional, but only do it or outro when Arc Edge has already fired its shot. Intro Galbrena and immediately perform her basic 2-3. As soon as you see her forte full, cast Echo and then skill to transform and instantly cancel with Liberation all in a row quickly. Then use your enhanced basic 2-3-4-5 into the kick. As soon as the orange portal spawns, dodge to slide through. This allows you to start your next enhanced basic 3 wings sooner. Do another BA 3-4-5 into another kick and dodge to slide again. You can fit one last enhanced basic 3 wings because you started basic 3 again before the final bit of Forte was burnt from the kick explosion of basic 5. Skill 1 wings proc the big hit so you can get a little bit of Forte back, and then outro to reset the team. Now Shorekeeper teams reset into a BA 123, then a Iuno skill, swapping to Galbrena basic 234 plus skill again, then swapping back to Iuno for closing refrain before finishing Shorekeeper's rotation. Verina teams instead give an extra intro to Iuno when the team resets, letting you cast closing refrain immediately, then swapping to Galbrena for a BA 234 without skill before going back to Verina to continue the team. Now some might want to play a non-healer team variant instead, since Iuno technically already heals. Say you might need the healer in a different comp. I'm showing this to demonstrate it works well and is similar to running a healer, but I honestly recommend picking either Iuno or Lupa, as picking both makes the team needlessly complicated and isn't any better than using healer. Galbrena is the main DPS, so if you're not going to run healer, Lupa is a much better choice here than Ciaccona. We lead with Galbrena skill for some Forte, then Lupa skill before Liberation for Concerto, since she doesn't get intro in the beginning. Cast Foe Breaker into Aerial 1-2 and Fire Strike, then swap up to Galbrena while holding heavy to do her aerial spin on swap in for about a second. Swap back to Lupa, who should now be on the ground and automatically uses Wolf's Claw for first wolf phase. Swap to Iuno and cast both skill and closing refrain for energy while waiting, then swap back to Lupa to cast Forte Climax. While it's casting, swap to Galbrena to do basic 2 plus skill and swap back to Lupa to outro into Iuno. Cast Liberation and Lady of the Sea, jump and dodge to cancel your flux, then perform an enhanced Moonbow basic 1-2-3. Cast Arc Edge after the first shot of BA3, then cast another Arc Edge. Casting Absolute Fullness after is optional, but only do it or outro when Arc Edge has already fired its shot. Intro Galbrena and immediately perform her basic 2-3. As soon as you see her Forte full, cast Echo, skill to transform, and instantly Liberation all in a row quickly. Then use your enhanced basic 2-3-4-5 into the kick. As soon as the orange portal appears, dodge the slide through. This allows you to start your next enhanced basic 3 wings sooner. Do another BA 3-4-5 into another kick and dodge the slide again. You can fit one last enhanced basic 3 wings because you started BA3 again before the final bit of Forte was burnt from the kick explosion of your previous BA5. Skill once the wings proc the big hit, and outro to reset the team into Lupa's enhanced intro. Cast skill as needed for energy into Liberation, then Foe Breaker again. Do Aerial 1-2 and Fire Strike like before, swapping off Galbrena to do another pre-hold heavy aerial spin for 1 second before swapping back to Lupa to continue the team. Remember to squeeze in the extra Galbrena BA2 plus skill during Lupa's Forte cast to reduce Galbrena's prep time once she intros. Now the Phoebe Iuno Ciaccona team is arguably her strongest team currently, as Iuno replacing Shorekeeper works due to her excessively high damage, and still providing a 50% heavy amplify even if heavily diluted. Ciaccona off-field passively applies Frazzle even to new enemies while also buffing Iuno. This team wants at least 130 ER on Iuno since we cancelled the second half of her Moonbow BA3 to save time. We start with Phoebe's skill to freeze enemies. This gives leeway to set up Iuno's first skill and 2 early jump cancels on Ciaccona into Aerial 1-2, plus BA4 to build 2 Forte segments when done back to back. Swap to Iuno to cast Closing Refrain, then swap back to Ciaccona to do a third jump Aerial 1-2, basic 4, for the last Forte segment. If you're on Heron, cast it here. Then dodge into a pre-hold heavy to cast Quadruple Downbeat. Liberation cancel once the shot comes out, select Spectral Frazzle, and outro into Iuno. If you're using Heron, cast it here and dodge. Then jump and cancel with your Liberation. Then perform Enhanced Moonbow BA 1-2-3. Cast Arc Edge after the first shot of your BA3, then cast another Arc Edge. Casting Absolute Fullness after is optional, but only do it or outro after Arc Edge has already fired its shot. Intro Phoebe while holding heavy to immediately go into Absolution mode. Cast Ikes and Liberation to cancel. Cast Ring skill afterwards, and dodge forwards to position in the ring to start attacking earlier. Cast Camille Star basic 1-2-3 and dodge on your third basic into a pre-hold heavy to cast Star Flash sooner. Do this 4 times to dump her Forte bar and outro back into Ciaccona. Intro into BA3-4 with a Fleur-de-Lis Echo if you're using it to crowd control. Then jump cancel into Aerial 1-2 and another BA4 to fill the rest of your Forte. Cast Heron here if you're using it and then dodge. Now skill cancel as soon as BA4 starts, holding a heavy to fire a Quadruple Downbeat and Liberation cancel once the shot comes out. Pick Spectral Frazzle and outro into Iuno to continue. Remember, you need to actually cast Closing Refrain inside of her rotation this time, Liberation canceling once you hit the ground. For Zani though, using Iuno here is actually worse than using Phoebe with healer, but we'll do a quick demonstration so you can see how this team is played. I would not recommend playing this variant. We start with Zani's skill plus BA3 shield bash into a Iuno skill to prep closing refrain. Swap to Phoebe and hold skill to activate confession mode with the liberation cancel. Cast ring skill and dash forward to start DPSing sooner. Cast Camille Star basic 1-2-3 inside the ring and dodge on third basic into a pre-hold heavy to cast Star Flash. Swap off the first one early into Iuno to cast closing refrain. Swap back to Phoebe to cast second Camille chain into a second Star Flash and then outro into Iuno. If you're using Heron, cast it here and dodge cancel, then jump and liberation cancel your flux. Then perform an enhanced moonbow BA 1-2-3, cast Arc Edge after the first shot of BA3, then cast another Arc Edge. Casting absolute fullness after is optional, but only do it or outro when Arc Edge has already fired its shot. Intro Zani and immediately cast Forte skill and liberation cancel on first hit, which is when you activate Sunburst mode for 20% Frazzle Amplify. You don't need the Blaze of the final swing because Phoebe already caps out your bar for when you ult. Cast your 2 full heavy slash chains with Night Falls, then cast your second liberation to exit. Cast skill plus BA3 to refill half Forte and outro cancel as soon as BA3 starts. We bring Phoebe in again, holding skill for confession into an echo plus liberation cancel. Ring skill again, dodging into your first Star Flash chain, then we swap to Iuno in between to double cast skill and closing refrain, swapping back to Phoebe to finish her rotation and second Star Flash so he can outro into Iuno. Now, as I said, this team isn't that great, and you're gonna need 2 gauntlets because now, well, you have both Iuno and Zani on the team. Don't even think about replacing Phoebe with Ciaccona or Spectral Rover. Now, for the last one, which is actually a decent team, Roccia makes a return with Iuno. While it looks weak, this team is actually strong enough to clear the upper middle floors at S0, R0, everyone. Yes, it's legit. If you really like Roccia, this is the best it gets and works with both Shorekeeper or Verina. If on Shorekeeper, start with her BA 1-2-3, then both teams swap to Roccia's skill for grouping. Swap to Iuno next for double skill into closing refrain. Swap back to healer and finish the rotation. Shorekeeper does BA 1-2-3 plus heavy into a liberation cancel. Then another BA 1-2-3 plus heavy and skill and echo into outro. Verina swaps into a BA 3-4-5 plus liberation instead, then a skill and echo plus aerial ×2 into outro. Both teams bring in Iuno next. If you're using Heron, cast it here and dodge cancel. Then jump and liberation cancel your flux, then perform enhanced moonbow BA 1-2-3. Cast Arc Edge after the first shot of BA 3, then cast another Arc Edge. Casting absolute fullness after is optional, but only do it or outro after Arc Edge has already fired its shot. Intro Roccia and immediately cast Liberation without the BA4 follow-up. Then cast skill and dodge cancel into Real Fantasy 1-2-3. Once you empty your Forte, hold heavy to charge 2 bars again and bounce into the enemy for another Real Fantasy 1-2-3. Cast Echo when your Forte empties, then outro to reset the team. Shorekeeper teams bring her in for a BA 1-2-3, swapping to Roccia's skill to group and Iuno's skill, plus closing refrain for energy and setup early before going back to Shorekeeper to finish the rotation. Verina teams would instead reset into Iuno, casting closing refrain immediately after and swapping to Roccia to skill for grouping, before going back to Verina to finish the rotation. And that's it for the Iuno team building guide. Thank you so much for watching through this entire video. I hope this has been useful for setting up and playing your teams. As a reminder, all spreadsheets documenting my testing can be found in the description and pinned comment. If you need a refresh on Iuno herself, do feel free to check out our complete guide down there too. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Stick around if you want to see interesting videos. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this one. Thank you all for watching and I'll see you all next time.